Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tiki Bar. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Doug Bell. He is a partner and CMO at Chief Outsiders. You also know him as the co-host of the Cannonball go-to-market Livestream, Substack. They're doing a ton of stuff over there, and I'm excited to be talking to you, Doug. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. We ask everyone the same first question. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
Philadelphia Eagle?
I saw this. You are a Super Bowl champion now. Again, congratulations. So you grew up in the Philadelphia area?
I did. It's a funny thing. I'm sort of chortling at this because I'm pretty sure it was actually pretty well aligned with where I ended up. I wanted to work on computers as a kid. But, the Eagles were a close second, but at that time they were pretty terrible. And the thing I'm chortling about is that my wife started making fun of me at work because I rewatched the Super Bowl, I think 11 times, and she would catch me coming home from her work, and I would be watching the Super Bowl. So I don't know how pathetic that is, but just a little bit of a background. But I wanted to work with computers, ironically enough. I sat in 1970 something at a terminal inside a trailer-sized computer that my mom had access to, and I got to play Battleship. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So that's really where my fascination with all things related to technology started, was at a young age.
Interesting. And then what ended up being your first job?
Weirdly enough, I worked for a company called GE Capital, which no longer exists, but they were the financial arm of GE. And I got recruited in and actually did M&A work. And guess what? A big part of what I did was sort of M&A work for steppers, in other words, chip manufacturing at that time. So it wasn't quite in computers, but it was definitely sort of around sort of their acquisition and integration into the larger board that was GE.
Okay, so this is post college. That's your first professional job, I would imagine. Any jobs growing up? Maybe as a still aspiring football player.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, what you and the audience can't see is I'm a small dude. I'm 5'9" on a really good day. So no, it's funny thing is I sort of grew up in this era of Gen X where we were sort of left our own devices, and so I started. Rather than trying to terrorize the neighborhood like a lot of my friends, I started a couple businesses when I was young. I was a tennis instructor, and so I strung rackets and I mowed lawns and everything I could so that when I started college, I could have a little money in the bank. And then, like all college students, started with some money in the bank and spent it the first 6 weeks at college and then spent the rest of my time broke. So lest you think I'm an organized individual who has this great life plan, I was like every other 18-year-old on the planet when I got to college.
It sounds like you were an entrepreneurial individual. And my understanding is that you did have a little more athletic acumen than you're maybe letting on. Was it true that you went to college or to play baseball, or you played baseball at a high level after that?
I didn't. I actually was never a baseball or football player. I played collegiate tennis and at one time had a sort of okay career competing nationally as a tennis player, and realized pretty quickly that the gap between my talent level and the people that were actually going to go on and play professionally was pretty big. So I switched over to professional kayaking for a while, believe it or not. Like whitewater kayaking. Yeah. It's not a well-paid professional, but it was fantastic if you wanted to surf on people's couches, traveling across the world and meet girls. So I ended up meeting my wife that way, so it worked out pretty well.
Okay. Well, Kamala Thompson told me you're a professional baseball player, so I need to switch that in her mind too.
Thank you, Kamala. Not the case. Again, if you saw my stature, you'd understand. Probably not a very good baseball player.
Understood. Okay, so you've got this professional kayaking career. That's really cool. And then looked like you studied finance in college, and curious what you thought your path might be during that time.
It's just of that era. The world sort of, at least in my corner of the world at Drexel University in Philadelphia, revolved around finance. That was sort of the Solomon Brothers era of big finance, before finance actually got really big. And so I was deeply attracted to that and that lifestyle. And so landed in M&A and was in the most unglamorous M&A job you can imagine. So, back then a laptop cost $10, right? So all of the work we did in the back office to determine sort of pricing in the acquisition process or risk and integration was happening on an HP 12C, right? So it was me, spreadsheets, literally like sheets of paper, giant sort of briefing books, and then a 12C, and then submitting that every, 4 or 5 hours to report on how we were progressing. It was not sexy work at all, but I learned a ton sort of about how businesses operate, what a going concern equals, and especially sort of what IP equals as part of my early career in finance.
So then you eventually ended up at a place that's known for its IP, and kind of the example for trade secrets always at Coca-Cola. I'm curious what stories you remember from your time at Coca-Cola.
Yeah, it's funny. I was a part of Mama Coke, but I worked for Northern California Bottling. And part of that transition was just that I had spent so much time under so much stress working at GE. So I was really happy to sort of get into the bric-a-brac of day-to-day finance. But the cool thing I had under my sort of wing there was I ran all pricing for Northern California Bottling, and it's perfect for this inevitable data marketing geek that I became. It was really perfect because then I was able to drive margin or gross growth, if you will, by manipulating pricing. And of course, I wasn't some grandmaster behind a switchboard going, let's change this pricing here. I had to work with the bottling companies and I had to work with their general managers, and so it wasn't just me determining pricing, but I really had to form these partnerships. And as a result of sort of having that pricing and then partnership with people whose, frankly, their jobs and or their bonuses were largely determined based on how well we collaborated. Like that's what began my fascination with marketing. Ironically enough, was running pricing as a finance geek at Coca-Cola.
That is an interesting application of kind of big data right away, and you're seeing the output of it kind of immediately. I would imagine that there's some enjoyment out of the tangibility there. Then you go to Cisco, and it looked like you did a significant financial software implementation from what I was reading. And I'm curious what it was like for you to manage a project like that. You're really young when you're doing it at a big company that it's in an extreme growth phase.
We were. I think our record was in 1 year we acquired, I think this is right, I think we acquired 22 companies the first year I joined Cisco. And the funny thing is I joined Cisco because I wanted to get into IT. God knows why at that time, but I wanted to get in IT. Again, I think that was closer to software development for me. But the other piece was that I sort of translated that M&A experience and the M&A integration into sort of IT integration at Cisco. And just very, very quickly, within really, I think a year and a half of my joining, the economy went south and the M&A group was shrunk quite a bit. So I made a shift over to implementing FP&A software. And so what you're referring to is the Oracle 11i implementation. And the funny thing is I've run a lot of personality, or I've had a lot of personality profiles run on me. I'm hardly a detail person. I'm a numbers person. I'm a geeky sort of numbers person. But I'm not the guy you want running your $100 million Oracle 11i implementation, right? There's a level of detail there. So the role I had, I was sort of one of the co-project managers along with Accenture. And this again speaks to a future career in marketing was, quite often the 11i implementation was incredibly impactful for different business units. So I was always the person that sort of was the face of the implementation. And I was brought in typically to sort of manage concerns or egos or problems with the business unit leaders. And think about, these are people back in 2001 making, $2-3 million a year. And I'm this sort of lowly project lead for 11i who's creating all these problems for these executives. So my job is to come and be like, here's why you shouldn't, 1, fire me, and 2, listen to me, and 3, why this project is good for you. But it really got me started in software.
Did you like the technical side of it? You had this ambition to kind of try out IT. Did you enjoy the tech and the software side of it?
I enjoyed the integration piece because that was my sort of background, my understanding of software through the lens of data silos, and then how do you sort of complement those silos, and how do you integrate data, and how do you create what at that time was not called data lake, but how do I create sort of a common operating data layer? That piece fascinated me. And sorry to any of my friends that are still at Oracle, but the software is atrocious. It's not and I feel like that was the majority of my time was dealing with the just how poorly constructed the software was. And I'm sure their ERP suite has improved quite a bit, but they were at that time trying to sort of nudge SAP's dominance in the US market out. And it just was not great software. So for me, it was much more about the change management, sort of the process of getting people on board, and then sort of replacing software that ultimately was probably better, but with a singular platform, you were doing more. And my God, I feel like I'm sitting in that room right now with an executive sort of selling them that idea, because we quite often were ripping out really good software and replacing it with really bad software. So yeah, it was a stretch sometimes.
After that, your career growth kind of accelerates really quickly when you shift to marketing, or at least it appears to from LinkedIn, and you kind of tease this interest in marketing. And was there a specific moment once you do start doing marketing work for other companies where you're like, okay, this clicks, this is going to be the...
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. One is, so this is I'm dating myself, but you guys can see me. This is not this is a visual event. So here I am. Guess what? This is 20 plus years ago. And at that time, marketing was largely brand marketing. I'm not saying there wasn't an importance for marketing's ability to help drive growth, but it was sort of abstracted from marketing. And so I sort of arrived at the beginning of SaaS. And then I sort of arrived at this era where things like PPC and SEO could drive a lot of growth for companies. And I mention all that because I was never going to be a brand marketer. I was always going to be a growth marketer. But the thing that fascinated me at that time, and still fascinates me, is the ability for marketing to move across different parts of the organization, product, sales, if you will, sort of the services organizations, which were typical at that time, to move across them and to really solve big problems. But primarily it was like, hey, when we do this, this equals growth. When we do this, this does not equal growth. And sort of that sort of goes all the way back to the Coca-Cola days where it was like, oh, wow, hey, check it out. If I do this with pricing, it drives growth. And then this is the point where the growth isn't worth it because we take a margin hit. So it was this idea of elasticity that fascinated me in marketing, but also, frankly, this idea of subjectivity and the ability to begin. So I started as a growth marketer, but quickly realized the importance of brand. And I'll never be a brand marketer, but really understanding like brand reputation's ability to really help sort of solve those bigger problems. And that's what's been my fascinating with marketing really since the beginning, is that combination of elasticity and subjectivity and how you bring those together to drive growth.
I love that. That's kind of poetic in a way. Okay, and so you then become an executive. How did your leadership philosophy evolve throughout those first few executive roles?
Well, funny thing is, I was sort of brought up in the GE capital management style, which was, I think, would now get a lot of people fired from their jobs. It was a very ruthless way of thinking about management. As I sort of grew up and then got into software, I adapted pretty quickly because there were so few people that were good at what I needed them to be good at. So part of it was self-serving, that you couldn't be that ogre or dictator-like person. And frankly, it was never just my style as a human being. So there's some things that I developed pretty quickly, which was, the first is I think it's a Charlie Munger saying, which is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so what I developed pretty quickly was this, and again, this fits to my lack of really like needing to have all the details nailed, but really seeing things from a big picture and a goal structure standpoint. And so what happened for me was I learned to hire amazing people and let them thrive, create an environment where they felt like they could thrive by creating lots of really good structure and lots of boundaries, but wherever I could, saying, and this is where you can go. In other words, saying, I'm going to give you enough structure to feel comfortable. I'm going to admit you're smarter than me and better than me at this, and this. Please go fly. And so I think that's not an uncommon style in Silicon Valley these days, or leaders like me. I have no idea if I'm in the majority or the minority, but it really came down to, one, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because guess what? I'm not that smart. And two, I'm at the end of the day not going to be in a place where I succeed unless my people are really, really, really excellent. And the only sort of tweak I would put to that as well, Kevin, is that there also are the realities of people who are underperforming and how to sort of recognize that quickly. And I have to say, like, if anything I've not done as well as I would like is way too much sort of lag on recognizing underperforming employees and moving quickly. Got a bit better, but that's one place I think that overall sort of superstructure of caring and boundaries and inspiration can sometimes fall down.
Do you think that comes from just a sense of positivity and wanting to be moving forward?
It's funny. I'm one of the few business people in a family. My dad was one of 11 kids, and the vast majority of his brothers and sisters and my cousins are all in some form of psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry, or, believe it or not, they're ministers or lay ministers, or so very sort of very much about sort of empathy and understanding the human condition, and that's sort of built into me. And so the challenge for me always is that I can absolutely understand and see the impact of firing somebody and what it's like for them. So maybe too far up the empathy curve sometimes, for my own good.
No, that's really interesting. My mom is one of 12, so I also come from kind of a gigantic family, like 40 first
right
cousins.
You would get lost in all the first cousins. How many did you have, Kevin? Did you have like 50 or 60 cousins?
Like 42. I think I'm 42. How about you?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea what the count is.
I only know that because my mother-in-law has like 30 something. She's really proud of it, and she didn't believe me and made me count them once in front of her. That was like kind of a weird competition. I was like, yeah, I guess I win.
Well, after this, Kevin, I'm going to sit down and make a count. How about that?
Please do. I'll tell my mother-in-law that there's another person. All right, so you're at these kind of major growth SaaS companies, leading teams, and you also are willing to move between industries. So, rev tech, martech, financial software, automation. Do you feel more at home in one of these than the other? I'm curious how you think about learning between them?
Such a great question, Kevin. I have to say, so as a fractional executive at Chief Outsiders, I'm blessed with the ability to choose. And I will tell you, I have to resist this urge to stay in MarTech. So I'm sort of right now in this place where I'm forcing myself not to pick MarTech every time, just because you get stale. Like you just get stale. But I would say my love is MarTech, partially because it's always under siege. It's so hard and it's constantly evolving. Like think about the standard MarTech stack 10 years ago, then just go 5 years forward. And then think about what the likely tech stack is going to be just 2-3 years from now, and what just a massive change that represents, right? And so the short answer long is I love MarTech because it is so in this place where it's constantly under pressure and there's so much change, and I love that change. But I would say the other thing, just going back to my finance days, like if I could spend more time in finance and fintech, I would do it, just because that's such a familiar couch for me to sit on.
Makes sense. What was it like for you the first time you got a fractional role? I'm just curious about kind of the balance of, hey, you've been in-house doing all these amazing things for a while, and you say, now I'm going to have this lens that I can view the professional world through differently.
Well, I think a little bit just more on that is that I attempted to retire briefly. And this will sort of inform what it was like for me. So I was so happy with the decision to unretire. So I was just delighted to be sort of back in there with working with companies again. So how I was feeling was terrified, honestly, and feeling like this bargain I was hoping to make, which was sort of trading the long weekends and just the working 70 hours a week for only working a little bit. And that ended up being true to some degree, meaning I got my weekends back. But let's go back to that first engagement, which was with a MarTech company, happily. I did a lot of the things that a lot of fractionals do initially. I overworked, I overpromised, I overdelivered. What it was like was trying to be a full-time CMO in a 2-day work week. And so I, like a lot of fractionals, or maybe other fractionals, get off the ground better, but I just was doing too much. And what I wasn't doing was thinking about, how do I provide benefit to the client, but do so efficiently, as opposed to, because if you're an in-house CMO, you're everything to everybody. Well, guess when you're in a fractional, your job is very, very specific. So terrified, but ultimately gratified once I sort of figured out the motions necessary to be good at what I did.
What made you unretire?
Oh gosh, my wife was ready to kill me. Was part of it, but also just there was this moment. It was November 30th, 2022. I was at Lean Data before that, and I had about a month off at that point. And I heard about ChatGPT, and I sat down in front of it, and I'm like, this is going to change everything. Sorry for the platitudes. I just didn't know how it was going to be applied. And my hope was that I could be a person who sort of figured out how to use it just for me, but I had ambitions of figuring out how to help my clients with it. And it took a couple of years to get there, but ultimately I fell in love again, right? It was sort of with tech, because at that point I was sort of bored with the tech, and MarTech, it was pretty boring. Workflows, orchestration, not that interesting anymore. A little bit of machine learning here. So that's what really brought me back in, this sort of boredom, my wife going, you're driving us nuts when you're bored. And then that last piece of sitting in front of ChatGPT was a big deal.
So you're back in the trailer playing Battleship again.
That's
Take
exactly
me through
right.
that. Take me through that 2-year period then. You said it takes a while, but you get comfortable with the new world. What's happening during that time?
Well, I mean, you could do what I did, dumb, which is I decided to try and onboard 3 clients simultaneously. Again, Chief Outsiders, amazing organization. And I was lucky to be in a spot where I sort of brought my own client, but then they added 2 more to my plate. So that first year was really about adaptation. And the funny piece was that ultimately the only way to carry 3 clients was to use AI. And initially it sort of was me like it was almost like I was cheating on myself. It was like, that's amazing work, Doug. Thanks for that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did that completely on my own, right? Which wasn't true. Like a lot of the analytical work, a lot of the content, I learned pretty quickly how to train Claude from Anthropic to write like me, right? Or to write like the brand that I was representing. And so I was just like, oh, I'm just amazing, right? But at some point I'm like, I need other people to understand how to integrate these things together. So that was the thing sort of to reconnect this idea of AI and bring me back into the fold of not being retired. It was really that. It was the ability to just say, hey, look, I'm going to show other people how to use AI to be more effective in their roles.
And when does the first concept of the Cannonball come to light? Can you tell me the founding story?
Yeah, Kevin, you were, ironically enough, you mentioned you were actually on the first Cannonball. So my partner on the live stream, Jordan Crawford, he's also my Substack partner. And he really, at the end of the day, he originated so much of the sort of hands-on tactics that we're all used to in the Cannonball go-to-market methodology, especially around data acquisition and message creation. But it was Friday night. Jordan calls me. I think he's a secret boomer because he never texts. He just calls. And I picked up the phone. He's like, hey, man, can you come over tomorrow? I'm doing a live stream, and you're the only person that I know that could host the live stream without any preparation because you understand AI. And I'm like, okay, Nitwit is going to sign up for a live stream on a Saturday. He's like, we have, I think the number was 800. We have 800 people. And I was like, okay, well, I must have owed him a favor. So I went over. And the original origin story was that I was seeing Jordan do the things that I didn't know how to do with AI to deliver a campaign. This is for a company called, I believe it was either Tenor or Shovels. I think it was Shovels. And, he really went from zero understanding of this company's market to building a lot of clay campaigns in a 4.5 hour period. And so the origin story was I was sort of doing the things he wasn't doing, like understanding the ideal customer, understanding how to segment the customer base, sort of understanding how to orient towards pain as opposed to your product and what it can do for them. Was working on that stuff, and then a lot of content development, like a lot of marketers. And Jordan had figured out sort of the data acquisition hierarchy piece, and had come up with this thing, which is pure genius, called a permissionless value prop. And so the origin story, a permissionless value prop, and I know this sounds like marketing, but this is true. And if you want to see examples, go to our Substack, Cannonball GTM. It's our website.com, or you can just find us on Substack. But it's a message so good, the prospect would pay to receive it. And that all happens because of sort of this combination of my ability to define a market and Jordan's ability to take publicly available data, weave it together in a way that provides a message to your customer's customer that would say, oh my gosh, I want to talk more. Right. So that's sort of the origin story, which is we sort of accidentally bumped into each other along the way. And we decided that this was, and it still needs development. Kevin will admit it's not for everyday marketers. But we realized, like, if we could bottle this, we could really help the marketing community get out of this trap of, channel management versus bad outbound. And really, that's what our goal is for the Cannonball.
It was a beautiful live stream. I watched the first one. It's actually hilarious that you hadn't had any preparation, because I was pausing the YouTube, screenshotting stuff, and then talking to my team about kind of with the backwarding out the workflow. And you kept saying on the live stream, like, just wait for the Substack, like, we're going to have this up. And I, of course, didn't do that. I was trying to back it out. And we created our first PVP in the next couple of days. So we saw territory design software. We started scraping job reviews from all these different companies that have big sales orgs. And we would say, this is what people are complaining about, how their territory is designed. This is how you rank against your competitors. And it was such an unlock, because I'd always, for a long time, just felt guilty knowing that a high percentage of our emails lacked relevance, even when we tried hard. And so, like, it just made me feel better as a person in sales and marketing, that, like, I was just doing a better job. So I'm grateful that you guys thought of the idea.
Well, Kevin, I have to tell you, that's why we do it. I mean, seriously, what you just said, that's why we do it. Like, we're not making money from this. We do have paid subscribers just because Jordan and I have day jobs. And so, we do have paid subscribers, so to speak, but it's really meant for us to ultimately hire some editors and some other folks along to help us in scale. But I have to say, that's exactly why we do this. So thank you for saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's noticeable. And there's this kind of ironic piece there where you were retired and now you're running a Substack, probably the most modern kind of consumption form of business that you could have. And so what was it like to say, okay, we've got something here. We want it to be X. How do we bring this to the consumer? It's such a new idea. How do we bring it to them in a consumable way?
You would think between Jordan and I just would say, if folks don't know Jordan Crawford, he's been out there for years, sort of helping growth hackers understand how to do their job better. And he's my friend, but also just will tell you objectively, he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. Brilliant. So I would say, like, I want to say that we had intentions for building a Substack. I want to say that, but we, like a lot of things, and Kevin, you have your own origin story. It's you guys a little more experienced than we do, certainly, but I think there's something similar. Like, you think you're doing one thing, you end up doing another. And for us, it was exactly what you talked about. We had promised to get the Cannonball, which was a name he made up the day before, on like a publicly available place so people could learn it. And so we did the Substack because we wanted to get the FIND training. So this is the underlying framework within the Cannonball. We wanted to get it up somewhere so people could access it. That was it. Because we were getting so many questions, right? We were like, just go check out our training. And it just exploded. Exploded in the sense of a niche Substack. So exploded meaning like we suddenly had 150 people signed up for our Substack. And Jordan was like, well, should we do some other stuff? And I'm like, you're busy. I'm busy. I'll figure it out. And what ended up happening was we started to just say, what do we want to write about? What do we want to talk about with the market? And that's the Substack. And that's still the case. It's still, if there's a topic that's really cool, like recently we talked about, we love Gladwell, by the way. We love a lot of business writers, but we love Gladwell. And we started noticing that with when we were doing a live stream, that quite often the existential pain point, which is sort of this thing that it's a line beyond which you cross as a business, that you may be out of business. And we started noticing that quite often flips over to a hidden advantage, which is very much the Gladwell perspective, right? And so I had a conversation on a plane. We went down to a growth hacking event in Southern California, and he and I were talking about it. I'm like, I'm just going to create a post about this. And that's how we're thinking about what we put on the Substack is what we do. What do we think is cool?
I love that. Simple and elegant. All right. I got a couple more. We're going to just go to the personal side of it now. That works for you. All right. So you've been kind of major tech executive for a while. You're running your own business. You're doing fractional work. How have you managed to unplug or unwind in your free time? Still playing tennis? Still kayaking?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Travel and the work has always been sort of tough on the families. Post-pandemic, when I was no longer sort of traveling constantly, this is going to sound sappy, but for me, it just became about my son and spending time with him. And so, now he's 14. Pre-pandemic, he was this like 9-year-old. Now he's 14 and sometimes hard to get his attention. So to the degree I can, I'm spending time with him. Otherwise I cook. Bad shoulder, blew out my ear kayaking. So those days, those days are behind me, maybe at least the class 5 stuff. But I will get back on the river every once in a while just to sort of tune out. For the most part, it's cooking and spending time with my 14-year-old, who hates me, by the way, which is great.
I have 3 kids. I have 2 young boys, 4 and 2. And so whenever I hear teenager stories like that, I want ignorance.
Yeah, Kevin, I have to say, I love that. I love that stage. But I will tell you, it's got its own unique beauty, the stage. Like when you see them blossom into people and have opinions and just like push on you just for the sake of pushing on you. Because guess what? We all remember being 14. So we're like, okay, I know what you're doing right now. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's something to look forward to. How about your favorite channel or piece of content, something you find yourself recommending to people? Bonus points if it's not in the world of go-to-market.
Yeah. Oh boy. You just knocked out 70% of the content I consume. That's okay. I have to admit, I'm a big fan. I'm like your typical 50-something white guy. I love sort of deep research and content. So let's call these books about history, especially sort of obscure history. So spending a lot of time reading there. But I've rediscovered one of my favorite authors back when I thought I was a rebel. And so I can send you a link to his books. He's sort of a lost author, but there's this guy named Bukowski. And if you haven't read Bukowski's stuff, I think he published 20-something novels. Go read it. Go read Bukowski because he sort of exists in this netherworld that doesn't exist anymore. It's an amazing place, but he was a raging, functioning alcoholic and wrote books in the throes of his alcoholism, but he wrote them back in the context of the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s, and just a brilliant, gifted writer. So, hey, if you really want to feel better about yourself and also feel worse about yourself, read you some Bukowski right now.
All right, we'll link to some Bukowski in the show notes. All right, and then because you are deep in the world of go-to-market content, maybe I'll ask for one recommendation there to close us out.
Boy, look, I have to say I love the theory, but I also at the same time love when people turn theory into practice. I'm going to give you 2. One is Firebrick, and this is Bob Wright's organization. They just do amazing stuff with positioning. Absolutely brilliant. The shame is they don't really publish any content. So you almost have to have been a client. Bob will get on LinkedIn and sort of talk about his theories. So if you have money to spend on an amazing positioning agency or a chance to talk to Bob, he speaks quite a bit to it. The other is I'm going to talk to you about Winning by Design because they take all this stuff we talk about and they implement it. And they have the SPICE framework and they have the bow tie. And I have to tell you, if I can get every company in the world, especially in SaaS, to use both, I think that we would be much more prepared for what's coming, which is this agentic SaaS wave that's about ready to overwhelm us. So check out Winning by Design. It's just an impressive team over there. And just even if it's just to, I don't know, check out how to sort of think about your go-to-market a little bit better, I would check them out.
Yeah, totally agree. I've got that book actually right here next to my desk. It's a beautiful book too. They did a nice job with the design. And then I hadn't heard of Firebricks, so I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Doug, I really appreciate you taking the journey with us here today and kind of sharing some stories. Really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to keeping in touch.
Enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.